Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom. I want to start off by giving all praises to Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Shem Kakwadash. Double honors to my apostles and elders, a great millstone that rule well, and peace and salutations to the elect men pushing out this word in truth and sincerity. This is the brother Yakanan from the DC Church, and the topic I wanted to touch on today, as the header is entitled, the incredulous spirit of the world doesn't affect us, right? And that's the majority of the world. They're incredulous. They're unfaithful. They have an unbelieving state of mind when it comes to, Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai and his law, statutes, and commandments. And we run into those people, on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis. When we on our day-to-day lives, the people that we talk to, the people, some of them which are close to us, some of them which we would call our acquaintances, and out there on the highways and edges, right? And that incredulous spirit is 99% of the world, actually probably even more, you know what I'm saying? 0.1% of the world, or I'll say 1/3 of Israelites will be able to understand and get this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding and be able to live by it, but a majority of our people just won't get it, and they have that incredulous spirit on them, on top of the other nations, right? And that incredulous spirit doesn't affect the saints of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. It doesn't affect the elect, Actually, that incredulous spirit, and that unbelieving spirit is the more understanding that you get about this thing, and how people aren't slighted to be able to get this thing, the more it's motivation for you to keep going. Honestly, it doesn't affect us in the sense of having us question whether what we believe is right or wrong. It's more motivation for us to, lock in and push the truth. Push the truth of the scriptures, and push the truth that Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai has allowed us to be able to receive. And without further ado, I just want to get a few scriptures on that. This is I'm gonna start off with 2 Ezra chapter 15 verse 3. It says, "Fear not the imaginations against thee. Let not the incredulity of them trouble thee." There goes that word incredulity, which ultimately means an unbelieving state of mind. So don't let the incredulity of the people in this world trouble you. Like, it doesn't mean anything, honestly, because it doesn't have any substance. It's not based on anything. You have people out there that believe in living a homosexual lifestyle is conducive to life, and the Lord is accepting of that. When you understand the scriptures, something like that shouldn't trouble you. You should know that you're lying, and two, you're ill-informed. You're very ill-informed. You don't know what you're talking about, right? So the incredulity of the people that believe in all these different imaginations, all these different things about the Lord and the scriptures, or don't believe at all, or don't believe in the scriptures at all, it's not supposed to trouble us or make us feel any less than in terms of our faith. It's supposed to make our faith even stronger, because these things were spoken of in the scriptures. We know that a majority of the people aren't going to understand it. We know the majority of the people aren't going to get it, and they have an incredulous spirit, right? And we know what the end thereof is for those people at the end of the day. So it's not supposed to trouble us. It's just a part of the battle. It's just a part of the battle, and also a part of the battle is knowing that not everybody is going to believe. A majority of people aren't going to believe, but it's our job to preach this word unto all of them, and the ones that are able to get it are going to get it and be saved up out of this thing before it goes down. Now, continuing on, that speak against thee, because they will speak against it. It's in their spirit to do so. They want to speak against the thing. The things of the scriptures. They want to speak against Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai. They spoke against Yahweh Shai when he was on the scene. So when we're coming in his stead and we're coming in his name and his spirit, of course they're going to speak against us. Because They spoke against Yahweh Shah. We're coming in that same we're coming in that same like spirit. So they're gonna do it, But the same way Yahweh Shah was in trouble, we can't be troubled as well, It says, "For all the unfaithful should die in their unfaithfulness," and that's the judgment that's coming unto them. They'll all die, They're all gonna die, and it's fine. We want that to happen. We want them all to die because we know that after all their death comes peace, because ultimately that's what we're looking for. We're looking for peace, and peace can only come under what's it called? Peace can only come under the rulership of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. It can't come under any other faction, any other nation, any other stead, any other establishment. Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai is ultimately the power that's going to establish peace on earth. Nobody else. And no other doctrine or no other belief system is going to be able to establish peace on earth because the foundation is not, the foundation isn't strong enough. The foundation isn't there. With Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, the foundation is there because that's the power that created the entire universe that we're living in, So the ones that don't believe, they're just going to die, and it's cool, Whether it be the ones that are so-called close to us or not, they're just going to die, and they're going to be brought back, be brought back into a righteous spirit, and for the ones that are of a different nation, they're going to be brought back into slavery, So it's fine. Now I'm gonna go to Romans chapter 3, verse 3. It says, "For what if some did not believe? Should their unbelief make the faith of God without effect?" So if they don't believe, shall it make the faith of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai without effect? Should it make the words that have been spoken of before time and happening right now, should it make it without effect? God forbid. God forbid, because the things that are spoken of in the scriptures are things that Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai spoke of, the prophecies. The law, statutes, commandments, things that were established before we are in the womb, right? So, what a random scoffer that reads on a third grade level believes that shit that doesn't mean anything. Like it's not gonna have any effect of what Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai has established. It doesn't have anything. It doesn't have any bearing on whether what we believe is true or not. God forbid. They what's it called? The words of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai are established, and they will not come back to him. Just as the rain comes down and not come back up, it's just like the word of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. The scripture says that Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, or I should say, Yahweh puts his word over his name. His words are over his own name. So that goes to show you how substantial and how powerful his words are. And his words are all throughout the scriptures in the volume of the book, right? In the volume of the book. So his word is not going to come back hither, Though his word is going to do what it's purposed to do, So should their unbelief in these words have any effect on them? God forbid, Continuing on, yea, let God be true and every man a liar. Because if you speaking against this thing, the only thing that you are is a fucking liar. Excuse my language. The only thing you are is a fucking liar. There's nothing that you can say that that goes against the words that Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai has established. That has any bearing over it. Let Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai be true, and every man that speaks against it be a liar. Right? As it is written, because it's been written before we were, like I said, it's been written before we were even in the womb. All these things already been established, man. Right? That thou mightest be justified in thy sayings, and mightest overcome when thou art judged. Right? Now, this is Hebrews chapter 4, verse 1. It says, "Let us therefore fear, lest the promise being left us of being entering into the rest any of you should seem to come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached as well unto them, but the word preached did not profit them. So the words that were preached, the words that we're preaching, on the highways and byways, is the same word that we heard, when we were in the world, right? But the difference is that the same words did not profit the ones in the world. The ones that are slotted for judgment, the ones that are slotted for death. It didn't profit them because they didn't believe. It wasn't mixed with faith. They didn't believe those words. So everything that the scriptures was saying, they heard the same things. They heard the same things in a practical sense, but spiritually they didn't hear it at all. Their eyes and their ears were shut. So physically they were able to hear everything that we're hearing, but they weren't able to receive it because it wasn't mixed in with faith. Continuing on, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. So they heard it, but it wasn't mixed in with faith. It wasn't mixed in with faith. So their sense of hearing was shot. They were able to hear it, but they weren't able to receive it. Right? But it's the same things that we heard, but we were able to receive it because it was mixed in with faith. That spark, I can't forget the first time that I was, one of the brothers, basically broke down what the truth was to me. It was like a spark went off. When you hear when you hear the prophecies, when you hear about Deuteronomy 28, when you see when you hear about Revelations 1, when you're hearing about all these different things throughout the scriptures, Job 9 and 24, when you're hearing all these things throughout the scriptures, you're just like, wait, whoa, you're connecting all the dots. A spark goes off, and that's where that faith is getting mixed in. You're able to receive these things. It's making sense. There's nothing that you can really say to combat it, because in your spirit you know it to be true. Because everything fits in. Everything fits in the way it's supposed to, in your spirit. And it's only because Yahweh Bashim Yahushai allowed it to be mixed in with that faith. And that's why faith is known in the scriptures as being a gift, because it's given by Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. But the thing about this gift is that it can be taken away. And that's why you have to give diligence to make your calling and election sure. Right? Now, continuing on, this is 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14. It says, be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, right? So when we come across these people that say they don't believe and, well, what you guys are preaching is wrong and all this extra shit, we're not going to be yoked with these people. We're not going to get together with these people. We're going to separate ourselves. The scriptures talks about being holy, and what being holy means is to be separate. We're all The scriptures talk about being a body of Yahweh Shai and Mashiach, right? And that body is separate from everything that's in the world. So we're going to separate ourselves. That's what it's supposed to be. You can say whatever you want, but it's not going to affect the body of Yahweh Shai and Mashiach. The body of Yahweh Shai and Mashiach is being made stronger every day and every day, because faith is being built up every day and every day, up into that perfect day when he makes his return. Right? It says, be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship have the righteous with the unrighteous? So what fellowship do we have? If you believe that you could live a homosexual lifestyle and be saved by Yahweh Shai, and it's okay with y'all, what do we have to talk about? If you believe in being an adulterous nigga is cool, what do we have? What can we possibly say to each other? If you believe that the MOTB is anything but the RFID micro. What do we have to talk about? What is there to say? Nothing, you know? Now, what communion do we have? What communion do we have with that darkness? Nothing. We don't have any communion, right? It says, and what concord have Hamashiach with Belial? Or what part have he that believeth with an infidel? So what, basically, what do we have in common together? You being an unbeliever and me being a believer, what can we possibly say to each other? Because unless Yahweh Shem Shai comes into you and is able to change your mind, there's nothing to talk about. Because through our understanding of the scriptures and through what the scriptures actually say is that there's two-thirds of our people are slided for death, and that's a given. So we already know from the get-go, like most of our people aren't going to get it. On top of that, it's only given unto our people, which are the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. Any other nation is not going to be able to get it. So we already know how rare it is to be able to understand this thing. So there's very little motivation for us to try to force it down somebody's throat. It's either you get it or you don't. And if you don't get it, hey, you're just going to be slided for death, and that's fine, because we already know that whether you get it or not doesn't affect Yahweh Hashem Yahushua's word, and it doesn't affect the time of his return, which is going to be in our lifetime, right? And it says, in what agreement to have the temple of God with idols? These different gods and these different powers, so to speak. And it says, for ye are the temple of the living power, as God have said, I will dwell in them, right? So Yahweh Hashem Yahushua is dwelling in us. You have to believe that he's dwelling in us through the Spirit, and walk in them. And I will be their power, and they shall be my people, right? Which are the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, which are the true Hebrew Israelites that are spoken of in the scriptures. Not those rats living in Israel right now. It says, wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate. So we don't have any communion. We don't have any gathering. If you don't believe in this thing, and if you don't believe in this doctrine in the way that Yahweh Hashem Yahushua has set, there's nothing to talk about. And we will purposely separate ourselves because there's nothing to go into. There's nothing to debate. There's nothing to try to get an understanding in the middle ground about. It's either you get it or you don't, And that's why we pride ourselves on being separate, because the scriptures have said so, right? It says, save the Lord and touch not an unclean thing, and I will receive you. And these people that don't believe in all these different doctrines, and it's not through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, and it's not been given to them by the Rakakwadash, the true Holy Spirit, they're known as being unclean. They're unclean. Their doctrine is unclean. Their mind is unclean. The way of living is unclean, And if we separate ourselves from those unclean things, we will be the more we're able to receive the Spirit of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. And that's why, it says not to have communion with the unbelievers, but that's more reason to have communion with the ones that do believe. So when brothers are able to get together, you have to get together with the brothers, because because you got to believe that the Spirit of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua is on the brothers that you go out onto the highways and edges and fight with, to the brothers that you get together with. You have to believe that those men are a representation of Yahushua. They're a part of the body of Yahushua. So you have to constantly be in the presence of those men to be able to build yourself up, so that the Holy Spirit can dwell in you more and more, so you're able to build up each other, and same likewise for yourself, Now, continuing on, this is 2 Corinthians 6:18, and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty, And that's, that goes without saying. If you're able to do all these things, if you're able to separate yourselves and not have communion with the unbelievers and have communion with the believers, in the body of Yahweh Shai and Mashiach in the right doctrine, then we shall be sons and daughters of the Lord Almighty, Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, you know? Now this is Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 3, verse 10. It says, but the ungodly shall be the ungodly shall be punished according to their own imaginations. So whatever the hell that they believe is being true, or oh no, God doesn't hate, or God doesn't do this, or God doesn't do that, that goes completely against the scriptures, they will be punished according to that, because they're speaking madness. They're ultimately speaking against what Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai is set up, right? Which have neglected righteousness, and that's the majority of our people. They've neglected righteousness, They've not only just lived it, they neglected righteousness. The righteousness is out there. They've heard it, but they've neglected it, They've neglected it. And because of that, they will be judged accordingly, right? And forsaken the Lord. They've forsaken the Lord. Ultimately, that's what they did. They forsaken the Lord, and like I said before, they'll be judged accordingly. For whoso despiseth the wisdom and nurture, he is miserable, and their hope is vain. Their labors are unfruitful, and their works are unprofitable. So, whoever despiseth the wisdom of these scriptures, there's nothing that's coming out on the back end of it. There's nothing that's profitable or good or known as good that's coming on the back end of that. The only thing that they have set for their future is despair, being miserable, and hope in things that don't have substance, that aren't true, right? And they will see it in the very, 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 very near future, especially in the time of Jacob's trouble, speaking about our people, right? Now, I'm going to end it off with Revelation chapter 14, verse 9. It says, and the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receiveth the mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, which is poured without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. So the ones that don't believe, the ones that have that incredulous spirit and that come against the things that are spoken of in the scriptures, the only thing that's slided for them is death, and the last nail in that coffin, so to speak, is going to be taking that RFID microchip. They already have the image of the beast, and they already live by that image. But the last nail in that coffin, so to speak, is going to be taking that RFID microchip, which is the MOTB, And once that's done, they've already slotted themselves for, a painful and agonist death by fire and brimstone, by, the Lord in the presence of the angels, and by these ICBM missiles that are headed towards all four corners of the earth, Hey, and with that, I'm going to say, call law, Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, double honor to my apostles and elders that rule well, and peace and salutations to the elect men pushing this word in truth and sincerity. With that, I'm going to say, Shalom.